Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MLS Now podcast. We've got the preseason content coming at you fast and furious. We have yet another great preview today coming up. Before we dive into that, just a few quick reminders. I'm your host, Russell. You can find me on social media at MLS Now Podcast. You can find me also on my personal side at Mr. Danger Russ. But more importantly, you're not here to listen to just me yammer on. We have two wonderful guests here on the podcast today. First and foremost, you might recognize this name. It's Beau. You can find him on Blue Sky at MLS Gamut. Beau, a pleasure to have you on here as always.
Joy to be back, man. Absolutely love this podcast. Yeah, awesome to get to be here and talk FC Dallas, man.
Yeah, well, and it's not just you. We have another very special guest who I know you were excited to have on as well. So I'll let you do the honors on this one.
Thanks, man. Yeah, for anyone who's an FC Dallas fan, you absolutely know this name, and it is an absolute treat to be able to have on the podcast the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Buzz Carrick. Buzz, cannot thank you enough for coming on, man.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you guys.
This is awesome. Yeah,
Pleasure's all
Buzz
ours.
runs, founder of Third Degree, been covering FC Dallas since, is it October 1997?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, so literally a man who knows where the bodies are buried.
No, I mean, we're in season 28, but I even worked on MLS for my real job for a couple seasons before I came back to Dallas. So I've been around since before the league even started.
Awesome. Well, it is an absolute honor to have you. Crazy excited about this. Probably just jump into it, man.
Sure, fire away.
All right. So I guess the big thing this year, I guess there's been a lot of turnover for FC Dallas. I guess the big thing is, should we start brand new coach?
Yeah, brand new coach. This is a guy I actually predicted would get the job back in, I think it was April of last year, before they even had fired Nico Estevez. The Hunts, by their behavior, the coaches they've hired have indicated quite clearly that they like coaches that have come through their system, that have a familiarity with what they call their club DNA. They went away from that a little bit with Nico Estevez, and I don't think they were real happy with how that worked. So they went back hardcore to their tradition of hiring guys that are often first-time managers, hiring guys that have come through their club, hiring guys that know their system. So it's really important to them. Eric, when he was here before and won a championship at North Texas SC and then was up for the job and didn't get it, he then put it upon himself to go out and get some experience in MLS and get some experience running a USL championship team. So this time around, he did get it. So he bettered his resume and he's landed the job this time. And if you're a fan of certain types of soccer, I think you'll really enjoy the way his teams play. He was a guy who, as a teenager, was recruited by Ajax. So he's an incredibly skillful player. And if you guys are old enough to remember that when he was playing, he's also an incredibly fast player. So he's a combination of a believer in pace and athleticism and power, but also the kind of skill that would be attracted a club like Ajax. Now, he didn't go. He stayed here and went through the college system and became, I think he was a P40 player. He came out of US Youth Soccer. But he wants to play a very direct way, a very sort of counter-attacking way, and get forward with a lot of pace and urgency and get at people and score a lot of goals. So it may be really interesting this year how it all goes, but I bet they're probably going to score some. We'll have to see how much they get scored on is going to be the real question.
So one thing that stands out to me when we were doing the weekly show and I was going through the transfer tracker, Dallas has had an enormous number of players not just leave, but come in. Do you think they've adequately addressed any of the holes that existed going into this roster, or is it still kind of, hey, we've got progress, but we are a long way off?
Long way off. They went into this season, when you miss the playoffs, and to the Hunts, their baseline is you're going to make the playoffs. They have that as their standard stated thing that I think they've only missed 8 times. I think it's in their history. They've only finished the wooden spoon once. So while they have not won any championships, they often are, more often than not, a playoff team. They're often decent enough. They haven't quite been able to get to the top and challenge at the top. But when they miss the playoffs and they change the coach and they've avowed that they're going back to their way of doing business, which is a little bit of an academy sort of focus and a pathway focus, But when you're not good, when you're outside the playoffs and you're getting these awards for missing the playoffs, and you have to improve yourself, by most importantly in this league, improving at the DP position or improving at the U22 initiative position. You can't miss on the TAM signings. You can't miss on those guys. So they quite clearly decided they needed an overhaul. And one reason why it looks like there's so many players gone is that they used a lot of roster mechanics last year and carried way over 30 players. With the extra homegrowns you're allowed now and the extra bodies that you're allowed for various rules and loans and injuries, this, that's, and the other thing. So they've jettisoned a boatload of players, and including, very importantly, and I wrote this way back before they started doing it, they needed to move out from underneath Jesus Ferreira's contract because the production was not equal to a DP. And most importantly, he really had been wanting to go for multiple years, and they were ready for him to go. And secondly, they needed to move out from underneath Paul Arriola's contract. That was a bit of an albatross because it was originally designed to be a DP contract. It's a max TAM buy down. That just eats up boatloads of salary cap. And then, surprise, surprise, here comes Boca Juniors for Alan Velasco, who they gave a raise to and a big deal to, Dallas did. And they thought that would end the Boca interest. And instead, it almost threw gasoline on a fire because they came in hot and heavy for a guy who's coming off of an ACL injury. So that deal made too much sense monetarily, and they took it. So now you're talking about a complete teardown. They went into the offseason talking about how they needed to rebuild the defense. So we knew that was happening. And so they've done the teardown. They've done the deconstruction. They've created the room. They've created the cap. They've got 2 open DP spots if they want to use 2. Lots of talk they might only use the 2 DP 4 U22 initiative model, perhaps. They've got a bunch of open U22 slots. They've opened up TAM slots. They've compiled something north of $12 million in GAM, right, just for 2025. I'm not talking about 26, 27. It was $12 million in GAM for 2025, and now GAM doesn't expire. So they have absolute boatloads of GAM laying around for the next three years or so. So this is not a overnight project. This is particularly the Alan Velasco part really caught them off guard. They thought they had settled that. Now, as a TD, you want to have other ideas, but that doesn't mean a DP number 10 is an easy thing to do. So they've done half the business. They've cleared the deck. They've torn down the structure, and now they need to rebuild. They're starting to bring in some pieces. They've done some things they like that align with Eric Quill's methodology and the way he wants to play, but they have not done the big ones. They have not replaced the Alan Velasco level DP. They have not 100% come in with the center back that we're expecting to be this big time center back to come in. They have not perhaps done, are we going to even have another Jesus third DP or not? So there's things to be determined still. And we'll see where it goes. They've only done half of it. You got to do the other half, or else there'll be questions to be asked.
I guess
you said several things there that made me really kind of want to jump in. And one thing that I wanted to ask you, you mentioned needing your DPs, right? Like this is a DP league. You're only as good as your DPs are in MLS.
Absolutely.
FC Dallas was without 2 of their DPs for almost all of last season. And for those of you who don't know, or don't follow FC Dallas closely, everyone knows that they missed the playoffs, but Peter Luxane came in and had them at an above 500 team, right around 500, if my memory serves, which made them a playoff team. And he did this without 2 DPs. Do you feel like that Peter Luxane kind of didn't get a fair shake or had unrealistic expectations placed upon him?
Well, by the time he took over, it was midseason, and the front office talked about there being a chance to make the playoffs, but the math was already very difficult. Prior to that point, Dallas had been in contention to be the worst team in club history, which is a 2003, which only had like 4 wins. So they were on par for that pretty much. Alan Velasco came back, started playing pretty well. So under Peter's run, he did get 1 DP back. Jesus Ferreira was back, not executing at the highest level, but for most of Luxane's run, he had all 3 DPs playing, maybe not playing like they played in 2022, but that's the question, is it not? Did Peter get a fair shake? I think at the end of the day, they set out the table. If you make the playoffs, this is your job to win as an interim coach. You got to make the playoffs. And he did not. So that's in a way fair, in a way perhaps not fair because of the math that there really would have had to have been. And I think down the stretch, there were just not enough fixes, not enough improvement, not some tactical mistakes that maybe sort of clinched it for him that he wasn't going to get it. I think maybe 4 or 5 games left, it was looking like, okay, it's not going to happen. Now, if he would have rallied them and gotten them in and like won out all those games, then I think he absolutely would have gotten it. I mean, he had the shot to win it, and he took that shot. I mean, when they tell you you can have this job, but if you want it, you got to win it. And he said, I'm up for it. And then, so it is what it is, and he still has a good relationship with the club. I think that bridge hasn't been burnt. I mean, he doesn't work here anymore. It's hard to go backwards, right? But both of his sons still play in the academy. So I don't think you can think that like everyone wasn't on the same page going into that deal.
One other question I've got for you, roster wise here, we're 2 weeks from the season at this point. 2 weeks and I guess a couple of days. But when do you start to hit the panic button? Because you said we're still a long ways off, right, from having the roster and where it needs to be. I mean, are you panicking now? Or are you waiting until like April when the window closes? Like, what's the mindset? Because it's a lot to do in just 2 weeks.
Yeah, the club mindset is not panic. It's not just the DPs that are missing. Number one, you got to replace Alan Velasco, and by all reviewers, watchers, writers, we all knew that player was moving inside. So they're adamantly out looking for that 10. I'm sure we'll talk about Evander and Lucio Acosta at some point. I think they're kind of waiting to see what happens on that front first, and then they'll aggressively go to Europe. But there have been players linked that Dallas has, not reported by me, but reported by people in Europe or Bogart or whoever, that Dallas has called about this player, called about that player. So they are out there looking for that player. The center back is worrying because they've been working on that since Nico Estevez told me last February they needed one. And they had a guy last summer who failed a physical. So they've known about this one for a long, long time. It looks like they're going to sign a kid who's about 24 from the French second division. I'm not sure that's what everybody had in mind. They're still missing some backup depth at center back and at left back. They've got guys that are hurt, and Giovanni Jesus is going to be out a long time. But then you have some nice pieces like Shaq Moore has come in. I think quite highly of Anderson Julio. So I don't know that there's a panic phase, but there definitely is you're not competing for a championship phase. If you have enough faith in Eric Quill, you probably think, his team right now is not great, but that guy I think can deliver a competitive roster on a day-to-day basis in a game. So I think that, they're capable of fighting for a playoff spot even today with this roster right now, but it would be very difficult because they don't have 2 DP spots filled. They only have 1 U22 initiative spot filled. You don't have the center back end that you need, let alone the 2 or 3 more depth pieces you need. There's so many questions that you have to begin to think, man, this could be a really long season. But we know the window runs till April. The club is very active and they're out there. They just have to deliver, But if as a fan, if you didn't recognize this was coming since about last October, then you weren't paying attention, because this has been coming, that this was happening. So you shouldn't be shocked by any of it. Maybe you're disappointed they haven't delivered as fast as you had hoped. But, if you're going to panic, we're probably already there. But I don't think that panic would be the right response. But you have to be frank and honest in your expectations with where the team is right now. This is not a team that can compete in this league without adding those mega important high-level pieces that it needs.
You're muted, by the way, Beau, if you're trying to ask a question.
That was important, and I forgot. Yeah, I think you're a little more.
That stays in for sure, 100%.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I think you're a little more optimistic than I am, Buzz. Looking at these, I don't feel like either Lawless Abubakar or Ibiega are starting level center backs for an MLS team that's not contending for a wooden spoon, personally. But I guess my big question is, and really this was the question last year, center back one, but last year going into it, the plan was Paxton Palmacal, who can't stay on the field, and love the guy, amazing player, but just can't really seem to stay healthy. And then the other one was Asier Yarmende, who was he 34, 35 last year?
34, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't really feel like the midfield has really gotten any better at all. Matter of fact, I feel like now with ER Mende coming, not coming back, it's probably gotten worse. I know they signed Ramiro, but he's literally, statistically, he's the opposite of ER Mende. He's a bad passer and he's a ball winner. But I'm just kind of curious, what do you see? I feel like midfield is a bigger hole than I think people tend to focus on the center back, but I feel like midfield's kind of a big hole. Or am I alone in that feeling?
No, you're not alone in that. Some of what your take or anyone else's take for that matter about how good this team is going to be, it depends on your faith in Andre Zanata and Sandro, the TD, to deliver talent. Now they think Gibby Alba's a star. He just got a TAM level contract. They have massive belief in that guy. Ramiro, Zanata was just talking about what a great player he is and how he makes everybody else around him better. He's kind of the guy that the glue guy that makes the whole team work and flow. I don't know. I've never seen the guy play, so I couldn't possibly tell you. I quite like Kafumana as a solid piece. I don't think he's an elite piece, but you can't have 11 elite guys in this league. Sometimes you just need dudes that can play, and I think he can play. Sebastian Lletget did a great job as a deep 8 last year. I think you're going to see that again early. He was Alice's best player, certainly under the Lucene part of the year and maybe the whole year last year. He had a really nice season. That's not fair. Peter Musa had a phenomenal season, but Lletget under Luxon had a fantastic half of a season. Led the team in assists along with Logan Farrington, who's back, led the team in assists. So, some of that belief and some of those moves they made were with the understanding that they have, look, in this league, you got to be ruthless. If you've got a DP that's being outperformed or performed equal to a 23-year-old kid on a bare minimum rookie contract, then you get rid of the DP and play the rookie, right? You have to be ruthless in this league. So do you believe in Abubakar? Do you believe in the center back signing they're making? I don't know. They do, clearly. So, they think they're going to compete. Shaq Moore's clearly an upgrade on that side. I think Anderson Julio is at least as good as Jesus last year. He's not as good as Jesus in 2022. That's clear. But I don't know. Anderson Julio is not a DP. You're not asking him to be that level. The guy that's missing, however, is the one you do need. So, that's why this team won't be able to elevate. There's too many big, huge pieces you need. But at the same time, if you're going day to day against some of these teams in this league, that the bottom half of the league, you're going to be able to win some games. You might be able to compete for the bottom. 9 teams make the playoff in each conference, right? Unless you want to have an argument about whether the playing game is a playoff. But only 4 teams, 5 teams miss? You're going to be able to compete at that level, I think, because I believe in Eric Quill. So I think he'll be able to compete for that bottom of the playoff with the roster he has now. Although I do agree with you that I'm not on board with their assessment for some of these players, but I think Quill's a good enough coach that he can put together a competitive team on a daily basis.
I think that's a great segue. If someone is listening to this and they think to themselves, I have no idea who Eric Quill is, what should someone expect to see out of an Eric Quill side?
Verticality, some athleticism, also some reliance on skill. You can look back at his 2019 championship team in North Texas and the way he set that team up. Where so far it's a 4-2-3-1. We have seen some variations for short stints in a 4-3-3 and also a 4-4-2, but mostly it's 4-2-3-1. Double pivot underneath that 10, that playmaker. You can look back at his teams when he had in the academy, when he had these flying outside backs, Jonathan Gomez on the left, Brian Reynolds on the right. Used Nkosi Tafari for a bit, seems to like a mobile, athletic, physical 6. That maybe is something he doesn't have. We'll have to see what Romario can bring to the table. So, they're gonna, if they play the way his other teams kind of play, they don't chase the ball. It's hot here. Real hot. So you can't burn yourself up. You have to. The best teams we've seen here were the Oscar Pereira teams, when you have to play patient. You have to let them have the ball and play it around, defend as a group. But then when you turn them over, you got to blitz and you got to go fast and you got to get on them before they're ready. And I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see it over the top, high paced, vertical, but yet with talent. So that's the kind of, it's very American. I think people would think of it. It's not going to look like Barcelona, not going to look like Nico Estevez's team. It's not going to look like Luchi Gonzalez's 6,000 pass you to death team, right? It's going to be when they get it, they're going to go like a track meet, but it could be entertaining. They might score 3-4 goals a game and lose 5-4. We'll see.
I'll watch that every day of the week if you tell me it's going to be a 9-goal game.
Yeah, I take that over a 1-0 game every time, right? It's more entertaining.
One name you mentioned there, really one trade that very much puzzled me was the Nkosi Tafari trade. I like statistics a lot. American Soccer Analysis has a really good thing called goals added, which is kind of like WAR for baseball for listeners that don't know. And there were only really 4 players that actually at the end of the year actually like had a consistent positive outcome on the team, and Nkosi Tafari was one of them. I'm curious, for a team that needs center back depth, why is FC Dallas trading away what probably was maybe their best defender? Yeah, he had his moments, but especially trade him away for what was like a bag of peanuts.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, I think you can take 2024 and throw it out, because the stuff Nico Seves did defensively and the way that team was performing, everything went horribly wrong. But I think you can look back at previous seasons and see what a player Nkosi Tafari was. For me, the most important quality in his game relative to the rest of the current team is that he could pass out of the back. The raw passing percentages are all kind of in the same ballpark, but he led them in progressive passes, which is where you're going to line break by, a progressive pass a game. And that's not astronomical, but it is definitely not insignificant. So why did they trade him for basically nothing? And the answer is, in their eyes, he was too mistake prone, and going into the prime of his career, he wanted the same level of money as Ibeagha. And also, perhaps they're trying to hint, or people are trying to hint to us, that he didn't want to really be here. Nkosi didn't anymore. Perhaps mostly because they didn't want to give him the money. Nico Seves talked to me about, he thought Nkosi could be an all-star level center back in this league. But to be fair, he does make some kind of poor decisions from time to time. And I think a lot of that last year was from the playing 3 at the back instead of 4. My deal is that if you look at Ibeagha and you look at Nkosi Tafari, even if you think Ibeagha is a better defender, he's not astronomically better. They're roughly in the same ballpark, to be fair. But Ibeagha makes twice as much money. He's 33 instead of 27, right? Tafari's got more pace and power. Ibeagha's got a little bit of pace, but when it comes to recovery pace, quickness, and athleticism, Nkosi has more. He's going to be in the prime of his career for the next 4, 5, 6 years. Ibeagha's got 2 at best. So I don't understand that trade. I think that's that's the one trade this winter that I did not understand and did not agree with. Everything else, I intellectually can explain it and understand it and know why they did it and why it's important for building. That one mystifies me, because he's on a very valuable number, a very easy number. Even if you don't want him to start and you just want a backup, that dude competes, and he's on a very palpable number for a salary cap team. I hear through the grapevine that LAFC is just ecstatic they got a player of that ability at that price. Is he going to start for LAFC? I have no idea. But sometimes you have to be able to just manage men and understand that how they benefit your roster beyond just the fact that he's too much for us to handle. Because Nkosi rocks the boat, man. He's a big personality. He's not the kind of personality that, generally speaking, the Hunts like. There are some coaches that are, if you're not a very strong-willed coach, he's probably tough to handle. He's got a brash flavor, a brash culture. I don't know that I think that at the end of the day, they just decided that the value on the field wasn't worth what to them was a headache off the field. I don't think he's a bad fit, that culture at all, but they sure seem to. So I think he's one of the most interesting players that's ever been here, and I can't believe they did that trade. That's my most critical trade of the winter, is that one.
It's well, you said, I'm kind of curious on your take too. The Seattle deals make a lot of sense. Jesus Ferreira didn't really want to be here. Some of the stuff I heard in the locker room that maybe his teammates didn't want him to be there. So it's kind of addition by subtraction. The Paul Arriola one is kind of one that confused me. I know he was on a DP deal that they were able to buy down TAM, but as of right now, it's not like they're using the money they were. I'm kind of
Right.
curious to kind of get your take on that. They're not really using the money. Probably could use the depth. I mean, he could probably start as a fullback, and they certainly seem to now lack leadership in this one. I was wondering maybe if you could explain that one to me, because Ariola was the one that,
Sure.
while I kind of get it, it didn't seem to make a
Mhm.
whole ton of sense like the Jesus one did.
Well, the Jesus one, my complaint about that one is maybe a little bit of undervalue coming back the other way, but that'll depend on what they can eventually sell Leo Chu for. There's a lot of stories that somebody offered $4 million for Leo Chu, so if you can flip him for some portion of that, and of course Zanata is known for his selling. That's what his thing is, especially the Brazilian side. But Paul Arriola, you're right. If on paper and in reality, everything about Paul Arriola is fantastic. Captain, leader, versatility, well liked, speaks Spanish and English fluently, right? Fantastic piece. Plays all over the park, still produces at a fairly high level. But he was not going to be a starter here this year, right? They're looking to upgrade defense, so you're not going to put him at right back anymore. He's not going to start at wing, right? That contract was an absolutely crushing albatross of a contract because you couldn't afford to make it a DP contract because he's not producing at DP value. That means it's a TAM buy down, and it's the most maximum TAM buy down. So it's burning $1 million a GAM by itself, $1 million bucks that you're losing of your what at the time is a limited amount of GAM, and it's a max salary TAM slot. Max salary TAM slots need to be guaranteed starters. They need to be virtually DPs, right? Particularly ones that you're buying down by that level of money. So Paul really was a DP. Like the season before, he was a DP. So you need, for that amount of money and that amount of cap, you need DP performance and delivery, and he wasn't giving you that. So like if you're a bad team and you need to rebuild, you need to tear that out and get rid of it and move on. If you're Seattle and you think you're competing for a championship every single year, that's a luxury piece that is awesome. That helps you get through Champions Cups. It helps you compete in whatever other cup you're going to be in. It helps you get through the dark days of the season whenever it was falling out of the wayside. He's awesome. That's a luxury piece. Fantastic for them. Dallas has eaten half of his money, right? Or most of his money. They love it. If they had to pay the full $1.7 million, do they want him? Hell no, they don't. Not in this cap league, they don't. Nobody does. And that's the problem. Paul Arriola is amazing. Everyone loves Paul Arriola, but not at that number. It's just crushing. And it's all about the math. It's all about the money.
But the plan is to start Leo Chu on the wing. Is that correct? Because it's interesting that
We
Leo
don't know.
Chu. Okay, because I was saying it's interesting that if Arriola wouldn't start here, but they would start Leo Chu, but Seattle was like couldn't wait to get rid of Chu for Arriola.
Yeah.
Like it's an upgrade.
Would not have been Chu. Well, at the time, it was Alan Velasco. Alan Velasco wasn't going to be sold. So he's not going to start in front of Alan Velasco. And then you're not going to start in front of Jesus Ferreira if he stays, which we know he wasn't going to. Based on performance, you're not starting in front of Logan Farrington either. So they move Jesus and they go get potential replacement in Anderson Julio, and maybe also the replacement is Logan Farrington. So right now, based on the lineups that have been chosen so far, it looks like that it's Anderson Julio is one of the wing starters, and the other one is still being determined. He's shuffling through pieces at the other wing. Chu, Pedrinho, who's a player they signed from North Texas SC, who's quite talented. Logan Farrington. We're only 2 games into spring training. They have 3 of their 5 games left. A lot's going to be determined over the next 3 weeks in terms of training and scrimmages and those games. And so we don't know yet, trending towards Anderson Julio being one of them. So, even if it's not Leo Chu, which I don't think it will be, if it's Farrington, if it's something else, these guys would have started over Paul Arriola here. And that's the level of performance he's at.
Okay. So Dallas looks like they're leaning towards a 4-2-3-1 this year.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what they've done every game so far. And that's what Quill has traditionally done in his past. Nothing's, of course, assured. You never know. But that's what he's doing so far. We got Bernie Kamungo here, too, who was discovered by Eric Quill and signed by Eric Quill and burst out at North Texas under Eric Quill. And the club just gave him a new extension. He's in that mix at the wing. They got one of their brightest homegrowns, Anthony Ramirez, in the mix at that wing. They got Tarek Scott, who's another homegrown who has been a Jamaican U17, who they think highly of. Now he's maybe a 9, but also a wing. So like if they're going back to their DNA, they don't want to give those minutes to a Paul Arriola They want to give those minutes to a Bernie Kamungo, an Anthony Ramirez, a Tarek Scott, or a Leo Chu, who maybe is a guy they want to shop window, so we'll see. Or maybe Leo Chu goes back to 2023 Leo Chu, and then maybe he is a starter. Because 2023 Leo Chu is phenomenal. 2024 Leo Chu, not so much.
I would take 2023 Chu for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing in here in Dallas, right? So many questions. We don't know, and what the answers are in 3 weeks, maybe totally different than what the answers are in April, and maybe totally different than what the answers are in August, because this is a team in the middle of a probable 3-season rebuilding project that's seeking out DPs and U22 initiatives that we know nothing about. They got a couple of guys that are in their mid-30s already. They're not going to be here for more than a season or two at best. So this is not LAFC or Seattle with their overnight rebuilds. This is a back to the DNA, homegrowns coming through, U22 initiatives coming through, selling players to make money. That's how the Hunts make money here, selling players. So we'll see.
So we just talked about, going back to the roots. You have players coming in, 2023 Chu, all that. Let's take these and use them as the basis for hypothetical answers. Mm-hmm. Let's say Dallas gets to the end of the season, find yourselves in like 6th, maybe 5th place, right? You make the playoffs. What do you think Dallas needs to get right to find themselves in that position in, 8 months from now, basically?
To get that high up the standings, they have to hit on the 10. The Velasco replacement has to be a banger. Now, it could be that somebody like a Patrickson Delgado, who they just bought, who's like an Ecuador U20 and got his first call up to a camp with them. He hasn't got his cap yet, but they think highly of him. Maybe that guy blows up and becomes the 10. I don't think he's a string pulling 10. I think he's more of a box crashing 8, but right now he's getting that spot. If Sho Kafumana turns out to be legitimate MLS, which I think he is, that's important. Number one, obviously, someone has to excel in that 10 role. That has to happen. Because Petar Musa can score goals. We know that. They have to be able to feed him, though. He's not a player that's going to pick up the ball like Messi, dribble past 5 dudes and score. He and Logan Farrington both are guys that kind of need the ball into them and scoreable opportunities. Farrington's better at assists. So maybe there's a point at which it's a 2-striker system because Farrington's a good off-striker kind of guy. And the bottom line is, like, if you took last year's team, most of whom, the goal scorers of whom are still here, Lletget, Farrington, Musa, right, Delgado, you take that team and you improve the defense by 5 to 10 goals, right? Shaq Moore's in. If Abubakar hits or if the new center back hits, if those things happen, 5 to 10 goals better defensively, this team's in the playoffs. MLS is a parity league. You don't even need to score any more than last year. You just need to give up a few less than you did. And Eric's probably going to score more than he did. So they might give up the same, but score more. You just need to take your goal differential from -2, I think it was, to maybe 8, 9. You're in the playoffs, right? That ain't that much. So, there's a big difference, however, between in the playoffs and 3rd, 4th, actually competing and being good. Those are vastly different things. And the answer to that one is if you don't get the 10, if you don't get that playmaking fulcrum, whether it be as a DP or whether it be somebody else coming through and growing up and becoming a baller, it's going to be difficult to really compete at that level.
Buzz actually making me optimistic, man.
Well, I don't want to do that because the track record of their signings is not amazing. Petar Musa is a hit, obviously, clearly. Logan Farrington draft pick, huge hit. But Alan Velasco looks like awesome, great bit of business. But the numbers from Velasco were not exceptional.
Right.
That wasn't, you needed him to take a step if you were going to do it, right? So, like, the center backs they brought in have been mostly like somebody else's rejects. So, like, I'm not 100%, there was a lot of ifs in there, right? A lot of, Beau, you got to hit them, right? Like, they've done the teardown. You got to now deliver and hit on the new pieces or you're the same team. And that's not optimistic. So, like, your level of optimism will be based on your faith in whether Zanata and the front office collective, the committee, can pull the trigger on guys that will actually get it done.
What is one name I have not heard a lot, and I feel like is an incredibly important piece to this team when he's healthy, is Paxton Palmacao. And he's one that there has just been absolutely no news at all since last year he went down. I know it was a big major surgery and everything like that, but I have not heard. I don't even know if he's been training with the team. Like, I can't find anything out. What do you know about Paxton Palmacao?
Well, you should listen to us. We'll tell you. Okay, here's the deal on Paxton. The surgery he had last year, now they're not saying this officially, but we all know was a sort of last chance to sort of save the career surgery with the problems he's having. I don't think they know the answer to that question yet. He is running. He went with the team to Portugal. So he's running on the side, vertical. Last time we asked, they were getting close to having him begin to cut. So he's not kicking the ball, but the general vibes are everyone feels good about the way it's progressing. So we're all still crossing our fingers and we're hoping that he's going to be back and be effectual because listen, he's $1 million player, right? He had just broke into the fringe of the national team when he started getting hurt. His salary is one of a player that's going to be a DP level talent. So if he comes back and turns into the player that he's supposed to be, this team will get a lot better in a hurry. But there's the verdict is way out from being determined. You know, they had an interview they posted with him the other day, and he seems really positive and really focused and determined, and seems like he feels really good about the progress. But you cannot even begin to assume that he's going to clear this hurdle and ever get back. We just don't know yet. You know, and one of the things that there was a big dilemma this winter, I think, was does the team hold the buyout? Because are you going to need it for Paxton? And then there's a second buyout. So now, okay, no problem. Right. So now we can hold. But as I say, the vibe check is good. The vibe check is on track for what little that actually means. It's better than everybody being like, yeah, don't worry about it. You know, they're buying him out. No, that's not what's happening. They've got him with the team. He's feeling good. So cross your fingers.
That is wonderful to hear because, man, even Paxton coming back at 50% midway through the season would be a big boost for the team. Obviously, on his contract, you hope it's a lot more than 50%, but...
Yeah, for sure you do. There's no timeline on the return. This is not one of those procedures where they're like, he'll be back in April. This isn't like that. This is like, cross your fingers, and someday he'll be back, hopefully. You know, he has to reach a certain level of comfort with the ability to cut, like strength I think it's in the knee, something in the knee, strength in there, stability. You know, if that stuff never materializes, the doctor that did this operation has done it on some NBA players, several of whom have saved their careers and come back and been fantastic. So everyone is like, okay, Paxton, we hope. And, you know, no one will know until all of a sudden here are pictures of him in training, getting bodied, you know, then we'll know. And that'll be it, you know, see how that reacts and see if he gets through it.
Well, let's definitely hope, because Paxton is, for anyone, Paxton is a wonderful human being. He is. I really wish nothing but the best for him. Russell, sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, I was honestly, this entire situation almost draws parallels for me with like Johnny Nelson and his time in MLS, because similarly he had a pretty significant surgery or operation that was
back surgery.
Yeah. And it was like, this might be able to keep your career alive. We don't know. You might also be done forever and you might have to go through life suffering. And he, you know, recovered well from it. And if you follow where he's moving, I mean, he just ended up at LA Galaxy this year. And he was starting in the playoffs.
That's exactly right. When he was here in Dallas, he had that back issue. Dallas made a calculation, a risk reward calculation, how much of his salary, you know, and they made the choice to cut him for a guy that wasn't a starter. He was a backup at the time here, you know, and they just did a math check and decided to let him go. Somebody else took that risk, and it has paid off for them, and it paid off for Johnny, and paid off for the clubs he's been with since. So he's a great guy. I mean, we loved him when he was here. Johnny Football, we called him. And, you know, he's done great things for, again, terrific example of a guy who sometimes you just need guys who compete, are positive, and have a good number, right, to fill up your team and produce minutes, play minutes, eat up those minutes. He's similar to Marco Farfan for FC Dallas in that way. Marco Farfan just eats minutes, you know, and sometimes you need guys like that.
Yeah, Dallas should take a look at some guy named Nkosi Tafari. That very much fits that bill. Yeah.
I made that joke. I was like, hey, what they need is a 26 center back, athletic, rangy, a little bit of a progressive passer. There's this guy for LAFC named Nkosi Tafari. He's really cheap. Yeah. Well, I think they think, I believe, and I'm hearing from people, they think that they've got that with an upgrade in the guy they're bringing in from the French second division. So we'll see if that's true.
No pressure.
That deal's not official yet. So we'll see.
One of the things you mentioned was FC Dallas getting back to their roots, playing homegrowns. I wanted to ask you, are there any homegrowns kind of coming through that maybe people should keep an eye for? Me personally, I'm a really, really big Nolan Norris fan. I hope he gets on the field. I don't know, this may be quite a thing. I think he might be the best passer on the team now that E.R. Mende's gone. I know that might be a
Yeah.
bit of an
I'm with you.
overstatement, but
Yep. Well, you mean other than the 6 they signed in one day? Other than those guys? Yeah. So we'll see. I don't think that any of the homegrowns are yet ready to compete for a starting spot. They had a bit of a gap that they cross over. Like the 2004 class had only Antonio Carrera in it. And, keepers come good late. So, but he was one of the top 2 keepers for the U20s. They didn't get Julian Eystone, who was a U17 guy and goal. So, but those guys would have taken a while. And then everybody that's a 2003 or 2002 have all been sold. Your Peppies, your Tanner Tessmans. So like all the great guys that they had are gone except for Jesus and Paxton, right? They've sold them for money. That leaves them with waiting now for the next group to come through. And you are right that Nolan Norris is the best passer in the team, arguably. He might be one step too slow. We'll see. He's one of my favorite players in the academy since he was like 13 years old. I've been talking about this kid. So I think he's fantastic, but he's got to outplay guys in the dead middle center of the park that are like 26, 27. That's tough when you're still only 19, right? So maybe it's not quite time yet. He is the captain for the U20s and plays at left back for them instead of in the middle where he plays for Dallas. In terms of actual homegrowns, Michael Collodi is competing with Antonio Carrera for the number 2 keeper spot. Keep an eye on that. The team's really excited about Anthony Ramirez, who I've mentioned, who's had a boatload of Mexico youth national teams call-ups. Really exciting about player. I've been talking about him since he was 14 years old. The one to watch, and this is the guy this year, is Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia was the lock starter for North Texas last year. He's been their best player for 2 years. They got him from El Paso Locomotive as an academy player, and they signed him straight to North Texas, and then they played him enough in the academy that they would get him as a homegrown. He is legit. This kid is going to be fantastic. He's been in a U17 camp. The upside is huge. So he's the one that I think we will actually see getting minutes. I don't think he's going to break in to be the starter this year, but he was their best player last year at 18. He won't be 19 until October, and the kid is fantastic. So keep an eye on that guy. And then the homegrowns past that are all going to be this new off-roster homegrown where basically they're going to play for North Texas. And there are other guys that are coming through the academy that are very exciting, but they're all 3-4 years away from really being impactful because you're talking about 15, 16-year-olds. That's not really, even like a Kevin Sullivan is not like, you're excited about that guy, but he starts for their MLS Next Pro team, not their MLS team, not yet. So there's no Pepe that, right, like at 17 is going to be thrust into the starting lineup for FC Dallas. The closest they have to that is Logan Farrington, but keep an eye on Diego Garcia. That's the guy I think that's got the most goods to come through and be big time.
Is Diego Garcia a 6 or an 8?
He's an 8.
An 8.
He's
okay.
a box-to-box 8. Yeah, game controller, dominator, crashes the box late. Stylistically like Paxton Pomykal, but smoother and taller. Really nice player. He's not frenetic like Paxton, but that box-to-box complete game player. Yeah, I think you'll like him if you get to see him. You can always go back and look at North Texas tape. He's phenomenal. He controls the whole park.
That's high praise.
Yeah, tremendous player.
Buzz, I'm going to throw at least the last of my questions that I've prepped for you. We've got all these high things we're talking about, and I'm going to just swing the pendulum the other way.
Okay.
What is keeping you up at night about this team? Like you're waking up 3 a.m, you're staring at the ceiling being like, oh my gosh, I hope that they fix this before kickoff or before summer or something. Like what is the thing that's worrying you?
Well, I don't know about worry, but if I'm thinking about like how the team's going to get better, they're obviously going sort of like project-y on defense. There's no like big time CV1 that we were expecting. It doesn't appear to be coming in. So really the bottom line is like, you got to hit on that DP. Like if you don't get that 10 right, if you can't get Evander, or if you can't get somebody like that, you're not going to compete. If you get a guy that flames out and doesn't deliver, you're going to be sitting in the cellar again. I got a lot of faith in Eric Quill, but he's not a magician. He can't magic up top of the table competition without getting the 10. So if you're going to get better, if you're going to compete, you got to hit on that particular DP. I do worry that they're going too hard. Maybe this is my worry. They're going too hard back to their roots. They're going to swing because they tried to go sort of veteran old. That didn't work. And now they're going to swing hard and have all these kids and go 4 U22s. And their track record with U22s is like 1 for 7. So it ain't good. So that's probably the biggest worrying thing is like, are you actually, because the stadium is going to be capped at 12,000 seats for the next 3 seasons. So the cynic will say, are they compressing the roster spend because they're going to be short revenue? Right? They're never going to say that. But the cynic on the outside says, man, is that what they're doing? You hope it's not. You hope they're not going all these kids and overreacting going the other way. You still want to compete, So that's probably the biggest worry. Other than that, I don't really know like that anything else really bothers me because they're going to take their time on the 10. Right now, I think they're waiting to see if they can get Evander. But then after that, it's going to be Europe, and we'll just have to bide our time. And it might be April, it might be in the summer because there's way more players available in the summer than there are now.
On the topic of Evander, I remember seeing an article. I want to say it was like a Tom Boggart article saying that Dallas had put in an offer for like $12 million for Evander, and Portland either didn't respond or rejected it, or the $12 million wasn't the number they were looking for.
I heard a Bogart thing today, like literally just a few hours ago, that FC Dallas is interested in Evander, but his exact words were, if he stays in MLS, I will be shocked if it's not to Cincinnati. That Dallas like kicked the tires on it, but I guess they're not willing to meet whatever Portland's asking.
Yeah, that jives with, I mean, listen, if Tom Bogart reported it, it's good, right? So, yeah, we know that they made that $12 million offer. I have no idea about rejections or any of that stuff. I'm under an impression that they're waiting to see if they can get Evander, that they're in that sweepstakes. I don't think 12 million gets it done. I don't. I think, and I 100% agree that FC Cincinnati is far more likely. They likely have more money. They have a better team. They have a better competitive situation. Everything about that is better than FC Dallas if you're Evander. The only way I think Dallas can pull it is if you go to Evander and you're Andre Zanota. Zanota. I've been saying it wrong all this time. Andre Zanota, and you say, hey, you want to go back to Brazil? Dude, I'm your guy. I was at Santos when we sold Neymar for 200 million or whatever it was, right? If I know everybody in Brazil, I'm your guy. My technical director, Sandro Olandelli, used to be the head scout for Brazil, right? We're your guys. That's how you do it. Now, can they pull it? At the end of the day, if he stayed in the league, the money matters, the competition matters, right? So I totally agree that like it's a long shot that they're getting Evander. I'm pretty sure, based on the people I've talked to, that Lucho Acosta is a non-starter for Dallas because of his age and the fact this is a multiple-year project. Listen, the guy can play, there's no question, but cost, age, it's not a good fit. I think if they don't get Evander, who's prime of career, right, 26ish, right? So I think they'll go for, because they need a guy that can be here 3 or 4 seasons, not 1 season, really. If you try and convince Evander, once you get him here, then you start working on stick around. Look how great this is. We have guys that speak Portuguese. We got other Brazilians. This is an awesome place. All that jazz, and try and keep them.
One thing that keeps me up at night, maybe you can help me with this, and this is a question I asked some of my FC Dallas buddies, and a lot of people wanted to know. What are the odds that Musa and Paz are here by the end of the season?
I think Paz is pretty good, that he'll be here. His weakness, the thing that keeps him from being a top-tier European keeper, are his feet. So he's a phenomenal top-tier keeper in MLS, but I don't think I don't think a European team comes in and throws down the money that would require to get him right now, to buy him right now. Now, if his deal's running out in a couple of seasons, then that's a different question. But like right this minute, I think the price is higher than it would be worth a European team, because you guys know passing out of the back's everything, right?
Yeah.
So Musa, on the other hand, is hard to know, because they've put a price on him of 18 million euros, which is roughly 22 million US, depending on what day you do your trade of money. That's basically double what you spent to get him. If someone comes in with double the money after one season, you're selling. There's no question. If you double your money in one season, you're selling, because then you just go out and get another $13 million striker and you pocket $10 million. I mean, they don't pocket it. The Hunts say that they leave the money in the club, and I have no evidence to suggest that that's not true. So if you're trying to get, you just pocketed like 13. Well, if all the incentives hit for Alan Velasco, if you bring in 22 for Musa, yeah, you got to use a bunch of it in Musa, but now you still have another 10 to 13 you could use for a 10, and now you've got another 10 to 13 to get maybe a third DP of some kind. If you're going to use that internal money. So if someone comes in at 22 mil for Musa, he's gone. And that's the question. There are teams that were kicking the tires on him. I mean, legit. There was 2 teams in England and a team in France. And so like, that was all real. Like, I don't know if they got an offer on the table, because they set the price at 18 mil euros. That might've been a little steep for what people see, but if he bangs in 15, 20 goals again this season, I mean, come mid-season, if he's got 15 goals in August, see you later. And then you're even more in a rebuild. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, we all know what's going on here. Look, the Hunts have not turned this club into a massive money generator yet. They break even, give or take, we think, without selling players. This is a selling club. So when they put a value on a guy, if the number comes in, they sell him. It is what it is.
Do you think the fans need to adjust their expectations then based on that? Because I keep hearing, how come they don't, we don't this, we don't that. But do you think that the average FC Dallas fan doesn't really understand that this club isn't necessarily, I mean, I guess they will publicly say they're about winning championships, but their actions kind of seem otherwise.
Well, of course they want to win a championship, but the Hunts have propped up this league for the first 20 years, and the survival of the league and the survival of the franchise was number one. Just look at the way they run the Chiefs, right? Until they got Mahomes, they weren't necessarily out there getting the biggest, most amazing free agents in the world, right? They got the right coach and they got the right quarterback, and now they're money. So I don't know that the Hunts they're never going to be your LAFCs or your Torontos splashing this money around, right? You have to, I actually think the average FC Dallas fan doesn't understand that. The average FC Dallas fan is like a suburban family, not a hardcore European snob. These are not, there is a section of the fan base that understands it, but I think it's fair to, and they might say otherwise, but you have to recognize that MLS in general is a selling league, and FC Dallas specifically is a selling team. A lot of the players they get from South America, they get because they demonstratively say to them, we are a great stepping stone. Like, look what we did with Carlos Grezzo. Look what we did with Pepe. Look at, like, that's their big sell. So I don't think you can be a fan of this team without recognizing that the bottom line matters. The Hunts aren't going to run at these $50 million losses, right? They're only the budget has to balance. If you're going to buy a player, you have to make the money to buy a player. Like, they didn't buy big players until they sold Pepe for 20 or 18 or whatever it was. Then they started spending on players. So now they sold Allen, they got some money. They got sold Jesus, they got some money. So we'll see what they do.
All right, future's bright for FC Dallas. Buzz Carrick said it.
I don't know about that.
All right, I'll export that as the quote to start the episode for sure. Yeah, got that. I'll write that up.
Yeah,
T-shirt.
Yeah, that's
that was
official merch.
That's right.
Yeah, Buzz, we'll send you your royalty check end of year for whatever we make on that.
You can expect tens and tens of dollars,
dozens of dollars, really.
We used to have a shirt on our site that said FC Dallas better than you think, because while they're never great, they're also never terrible. And like they're in the top 5 all-time points. They're one of the better home records ever. They've only missed the playoffs like 8 times. So they're never great, but they're also almost never terrible. There's only been 1 or 2 really bad seasons. In 2003 is, of course, the worst one. So.
Fair enough. Well, hey, as a Cincinnati fan, I can proudly say we've only missed the playoffs 3 times.
Yeah, you guys went 0 for 3 of the first 3. That's a little rough.
My stat was right. I was hoping you wouldn't call me out on the facts that support that, but
looks great now though.
Yeah,
your defense is fantastic.
Yeah, nervous there, but that's saved for an FC Cincinnati preview that will be recorded later this week.
Right,
as there's a number of questions around that team right now.
Yeah,
awesome.
Well, Buzz,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
Buzz, do you have you want to like throw any last plugs in there? Any final thoughts, closing opinions, or anything? Or if not, I can take us home.
Well, if you want to plug, thirddegree.net is the website. Third Degree, the podcast, is where we do a lot of blathering about nothing. Well, not nothing. FC Dallas. The crazy thing is that we're on the way to having 7 or 8 professional soccer teams in Dallas. It's incredible. Dallas has long been a soccer market in terms of producing players. Now they don't deliver in the stands unless it's Mexico, but there's definitely a soccer audience here, or people seem to think there is, because we're getting a USL Championship team and a USL 1 team, and we have a Women's Super League team, and we now have 3 NPSL teams, and we're getting a USL 2 team, and it's just ridiculous the amount of soccer that's happening here. So we're trying our best to cover it all. So if you're in Dallas and you want to hear about soccer down here, I think we're the place to be. And I think it's going to be if you can keep your emotions out of it as a fan, which is difficult, I know, for most fans, it's going to be a fascinating season for FC Dallas, because there are so many questions to be answered, so much yet to be determined and signed. They're missing basic, simple roster pieces, let alone stars. And we got 3 weeks to go to the season. So it's going to be a ride. Hopefully we'll enjoy one, but it might not be enjoyable. It might be crazy, but either way, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
One real quick question before we leave. Named Peter Musa, who is the team MVP at the end of the year?
Probably
Musa's
Farrington.
Kind of a layup, so
probably Farrington.
All right.
Depending on where they
got high hopes for Patrickson Delgado this year.
I do not.
Maybe a little too high, but
I'm not a fan.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I would not have bought him, but I think he's tough to identify exactly what position he's going to play. He thinks he's a 10. I don't think he's a 10. That was a little too loose with the ball for me. He's not tidy enough.
He was the guy where they thought he was a winger, correct? But he's more of an 8.
Well, when they brought him in, they were playing him like as a 6'8", and everyone in the club and everyone all around him was like, okay, he's a 6. The thing was, because Ajax was playing him as a 6. So everyone was like, oh, he's a 6. And then it turned out like late in the season, they had to use him high. And I'm like, man, it's cool, Nico Sevez, that you were putting Delgado up there as a 10. He's like, oh yeah, he is a 10. Why has he been playing? We needed okay. So that's when we all found out he was a 10. So, your mileage may vary on whether he's a good 10 or not. I'm not particularly excited. He thinks he's fantastic. He's a great guy though. Great locker room guy, great piece. Doesn't rock the boat so far. So, but I'm not expecting a big season from him. I think the other guy that could make or break the season for them, other than Paxton, of course, in his health, is Leggett. If Leggett holds up and delivers again, that really helps them a lot, because they need somebody to carry the load for a bit, until you get that 10s and you get somebody else coming through. So could be a big year for Leggett in terms of how this team does.
I believe Leggett's in the final year of his contract too, so it'd be a pretty good time to turn it on.
Yeah, he's got a big deal, big contract, but he's in his 30s, so he's going to want to play for money, right? Because he wants a couple more deals probably. In the meantime, Dallas really needs a guy to carry some weight, be a leader. We'll see how he does.
Awesome. Well, Buzz, I really, truly cannot thank you enough, man. This has been amazing.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. Hope you have a good season for your respective teams.
Hey, thank you very much. And just a reminder to everyone listening, if you want to follow Buzz and his work, feel free to check them out on thirddegree.net. In the meantime, as always, thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate everyone who continues to listen and support for the MLS Now podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. Beau, Buzz, You've got me, your host, Russell, and everyone will see you on the next episode.